Hello, welcome to RC Video Reviews. In today's video, we're going to cover 5 things that I would buy if I were just getting started in the hobby again today. So you decided to get into radio control flying, you got on the internet to figure out how to get started, and you just get inundated with information. In today's video, we're going to cover 5 things that I would buy if I were just getting started in the hobby based on what I know today. First up, you got to get yourself a simulator. There are a couple of different simulators available for the type of flying that you want to do. If you're interested in fixed wing flying, for example, I like a real flight simulator, which is what you see on the screen right now. It has really good fixed wing physics. The scenery is fine, but what's most important about this simulator is it helps you learn how to avoid mistakes. It helps you learn how to recover from things like that accident. And if you have a problem, you simply hit a reset button and you're back to flying. I cannot stress enough how important it is to get a simulator first. If I were starting over, this is the first RC product I would buy. It'd be a flight simulator. I'll show you a couple of others outside the fixed wing space in case you're interested in things like helicopters or quads, but whatever you do, get yourself a simulator first. All of the simulators I'm about to show you are available on Steam, so you can download Steam and install all of these simulators right from Steam. So the first one, Real Flight, the current version is Real Flight Evolution. I'm personally still using Real Flight 7.5, so if you can find yourself an older copy and save some money, that's great, but I like Real Flight quite a bit for fixed wing flying. Next up is AccuRC. So if you're into helicopters and you want to learn to fly helicopters, I think AccuRC is fine. Although I do have one gripe, they lost multiplayer some time ago, so if you want to fly with your friends, that capability used to be in like this beta version of AccuRC they had, but it hasn't worked for several months now. So just caveat, you can't fly with your friends on AccuRC as of this video. Hopefully that's something they'll get fixed. But again, it comes down to physics, and when it comes to physics, I like AccuRC the best. And then if you're flying quad, Liftoff is great for that. They've got some really nice maps. They have the ability to fly in a race or in just an open field via FPV. So lots of different ways to fly the quad. I like Liftoff, again, mainly because of physics. I think it has the best quad physics. So there you go. Those are my recommendations for simulators. Use Real Flight for fixed wing, AccuRC for helicopters, and Liftoff for quads. And that brings us to the next thing you'll need to buy, and that's an airframe. But first, for you electronics gurus and tinkerers out there, check out PCBWay.com. PCBWay has a full suite of services available to make your ideas a reality, including PCB manufacturing and assembly, CNC machining, 3D printing, and injection molding. When you're ready to order, PCBWay provides instant quotes, real-time production tracking, and you can order as few as 5 boards at a time, which is great for early-stage projects. If you need an experienced partner to help bring your ideas to life, check out PCBWay.com. I have a link in the description if you'd like to give them a look. All I can say about airframes is there are certain companies that are really good at marketing and they've penetrated at the AMA fields, but some of the recommendations I see for trainers are just awful trainers. And the reason I say that isn't simply because of flight characteristics. Some of the other trainers fly well, but the problem I have is they're just too complex. When you're first getting started, you need simple. You need simple and cheap and easy to repair because you're going to crash. It's going to happen. So that's why I like the Crash Test Hobby Albatross really well as a trainer. It's $85. You do have to buy the electrics. You've got to buy the motor and the servo and the ESC. You'll have to buy some extra things for it. But at $84, the airframe itself is cheap, and it's made of EPP foam, which can, number one, take a punch, and number two, it's fairly easy to repair. And this plane has excellent flight characteristics for a beginner. It's very docile. However, they also sell a version that's got ailerons. So if you want aileron control, or what we call full house control or 4-channel control, you can buy the aileron version. And I'd actually recommend that because you'll grow into it. You don't have to use the ailerons, but you can. So get the aileron version of this plane, $89, and you've got an airplane that's going to let you learn how to get off the ground, fly around, and if you make a mistake, it's easy to recover. Half the time, you don't even have to repair it. You just put another rubber band on the wing and get it back up in the air again. I love the Albatross. I think it's a fantastic trainer. In my opinion, best trainer on the market. Now, if that's a little too rudimentary for you, or if you don't want to do this level of build because you're just getting started, there are other options out there. I found this Skynetic Trainer King 44-inch wingspan ARF bundle on Motion RC, which looks like it's going to be fairly easy to put together. It's made of the same type of material. It's EPP foam, which is very, very durable. But the important thing about this one is it comes with the motor and the ESC and the servos. And it looks like it'd be fairly easy to put together. And of course, it's got some landing gear. So if you have a paved runway and you want to take off of your paved runway, you can do that as well. It's also priced competitively at $120, and it's got a high wing. The reason you want high wing as a trainer is because they just tend to be a little bit more stable. The fuselage acts as a pendulum, and the airplane will have a tendency to try and self-center itself. So that's the reason you kind of look at high wing airplanes for trainers if you're just getting started. And if you want to go up a step, there's another option I found on Motion RC called a Skynetic Air Titan. This one's a 63-inch wingspan, which is really nice when you're flying because it's easy to see. And for beginners, that's very important. High visibility, and I can tell by looking at this color scheme, it really looked good in the sky. It would pop out. The white and blue would provide really good contrast for a beginner when you're relying on the airframe and the markings to figure out orientation. This one is a little more expensive at $279, but because it's a plug and play, it'll include all the things you need to get started, including the ESC, the motor, and the servos. The only thing you'll have to do, the plug and play part, is you'll have to add your radio system and your batteries. So this one's a little more expensive. It's made out of EPO foam instead of EPP. EPO can be repaired, but it's not as resilient to crashing as EPP. That's why I put this one third on the list. That said, the Air Titan looks like a really nice airframe, large wingspan at 63 inches, and it's kind of budget friendly at $279 because it includes just about everything you need to get started. That wraps up airframes. Next, we're going to take a look at radios. I'll have links in the description for everything I'm showing you. Some of them are affiliate links, some are not. If you don't mind using my affiliate link, that's great. It helps the channel get a little bit of extra revenue or kickback from the seller, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. I actually made my decision to use RadioMaster based on the firmware, not the radio itself. When I first got into flying, I got into OpenTX right away, and OpenTX is an open source firmware that runs on the radio. And the reason I feel that's so important is because when the software and the hardware are separated, you don't have what I call a closed ecosystem. That means that the market can add hardware utilizing the OpenTX or EdgeTX firmware, and that keeps things competitive. So RadioMaster, for example, they have to be price competitive because other radio manufacturers can use the firmware, and a good deal of the value comes from the firmware itself. In my case, I'll be on EdgeTX for good. I don't see anything on the horizon at this point that would convince me to leave EdgeTX. So that means I need an EdgeTX-based radio, and lots of different manufacturers can supply them. So in this video, we're going to take a look at two EdgeTX radios that I happen to like quite a bit. The first one is my daily driver. It's the TX16S Mark II, and the second one is the Boxer. So the Boxer is a recent release by RadioMaster that also runs EdgeTX. I realize the TX16S may seem a little intimidating if you're new to the hobby and you've never used a radio system like this before. The main thing to take away from it is the TX16S will grow with you in the hobby. You will not outgrow this radio. It has the capabilities to fly basically anything on the market. It's got a lot of channel capabilities. It's got a fantastic memory system. It's got a very advanced firmware, and there's a whole slew of upgrades you can add to the radio to make it your own. The baseline RadioMaster TX16S Mark II runs about $199. Keep in mind that won't have the fancy gimbals or the LED lights or any of that stuff, but the basic radio, which has all the core functionality, is this radio that runs about $199. A solid alternative to the TX16S for a beginner is the RadioMaster Boxer. This one is a relatively new release. This radio is about the same width as my TX16S. They're about the same size in the hand, and therefore it feels really good in the hands. And it also uses full-size gimbals, and it runs the awesome EdgeTX firmware. So while the looks are a little bit different, when I press the buttons and navigate around, it's very familiar to me because it's still running EdgeTX. The layout looks a little different, but the capability capabilities are all there. You do lose a little bit of functionality with the Boxer, so you can tell on the top there are fewer switches, you don't have sliders on the side, so you lose a couple of buttons and knobs. But that's okay. If you're a beginner and just getting started, this one represents a little bit less risk because it sells for $139. And they also have Express LRS versions. We're going to talk about Express LRS next, but in this particular Boxer, that's an Express LRS radio system that's internal to the radio. The Boxer also allows for expansion because it's got the external JR base, so you can add external modules if you decide you want to experiment with other technologies like Tracer or Crossfire or Ghost or something other than what's included with the radio. You'll be able to experiment with those other technologies by adding modules to this module bay. And to stick with the theme of running open source firmware on your radio, this is a FlySky EL18, which also runs Edge TX. So this is a very direct competitor to the TX16S. The EL18 also has the ability to expand. These screw holes allow you to mount an external bay adapter. So if you want to experiment with other protocols, you can mount one of those on the back of this radio as well. So the FlySky EL18 is just another Edge TX based radio option out there if you're just getting started. One more thing we need to talk about when it comes to radios is the RF technology. So this radio includes a transmitter or a radio frequency transmitter. And in my case, I actually have two. I have one antenna here for an internal 4-in-1 module, and I have one antenna here that runs Express LRS. I'm just going to make this real simple. I highly recommend getting involved in Express LRS. This is the Radio Master Micro Express LRS module, and this module resides in that external bay. Radio Master also sells a TX16S and a Boxer with Express LRS built in, so you don't need to add the external bay. You can use the internal antenna instead. Now, the reason I recommend Express LRS is because what I see coming is a lot of development in the Express LRS space. We have the ability to run CRSF, which will let you run it on a quad, or anything with a flight computer like Betaflight or iNav. We have S-Bus now coming in a release very soon, and S-Bus allows us to use the receivers on things like gyros that you'd find in a fixed-wing plane and in helicopters. And we also have PWM, which is normally what provides signal to a servo directly without any flight computers involved at all. So if you have a fixed-wing plane with no gyro and no flight computer, Express LRS supports that one as well. So that's key to me. We have CRSF, S-Bus, and PWM on one single RF technology. That's a hugely important step and why I recommend Express LRS. Express LRS is also proven to be a dead reliable radio protocol over the air. Once you've got a bind on an Express LRS receiver, assuming your mechanics are in good shape, you can rest assured the plane's not going to come out of the air due to loss of control by the radio. Radio Master sells a couple of different modules. This one is the Radio Master Ranger. This one is the Radio Master Ranger Micro. They both run Express LRS. The Ranger has some external configuration buttons and an OLED screen, so when it's in the radio, you can configure it using these buttons and the screen. The big difference between the Micro and the Ranger is that the Micro doesn't have a screen or buttons because you don't need to configure it externally. You can configure it from within the radio itself. So my daily flyer when it comes to Express LRS is the Radio Master Micro. I've got both, but this is the one I use. It's very important if you go to buy a TX16S that you pay attention to the radio technology you're getting. Make sure you make an informed decision. You can get Express LRS, which we just spent a little bit of time talking about, or you can get 4-in-1. The benefit of 4-in-1 is it allows you to compare with multiple different receivers. So if you have a whole bunch of different over-the-air protocol receivers like FlySky or DSMX or D16, the 4-in-1 module allows you to bind with all of them. So it's a very nice technology to have at your disposal if you have a lot of different over-the-air protocols. But if you're just getting started and you're going to stick with Express LRS, you can get away with the ELRS version and you'll be just fine. Same deal on the Boxer. You've got the Express LRS version, a 4-in-1 version, and you'll also see a CC2500. This one is referred to out there in some cases as a multi-protocol. I don't like that because while it certainly does support different over-the-air protocols, it's not a true 4-in-1. There is a big difference between a CC2500 and a 4-in-1. What I would say about this, just to make it simple, is the 4-in-1 contains a CC2500. So anything the CC2500 can do, the 4-in-1 can do, but you can't say that in reverse. Honestly, I would just go for either the ELRS or 4-in-1. I have links in the description for the various Ranger modules you can buy. These are all from Radio Master. So this is the Ranger 2.4 gigahertz. There's also a Micro. This is the one that I use on my radio. And if you need to get a couple of Express LRS PWM receivers, you can pick those up at Radio Master as well. This one is the ER5C. It's got the upright antenna, and this is the ER5A. This has the antenna that lays down. So choose which one works for you. Functionally, they're both the same. They both run the same protocol and software. One just has an antenna that stands up, and one has an antenna that lays down. All right, that's it on radios. The next thing we're going to talk about are chargers. Now, there are a myriad of options when it comes to LiPo chargers, and we do use LiPo batteries in the hobby, so you need to get a LiPo balance charger. That's the key. Most of the chargers out there these days, fortunately, are able to charge LiPo batteries and they have balance ports on them. So I'm going to cover a couple of key specs so you make an informed buying decision. Again, I'll have links in the description for everything you're about to see, but let's get started taking a look at this one. This one is a Toolkit M6 DAC, and the AC is an indicator there telling you that this one is DC and AC. So you see on this side, I've got an AC input that plugs directly into a wall. And on this side, it's DC, which plugs into my DC power supply. The main thing you need to think about when it comes down to AC and DC charging is where you intend to use the charger. If you're going to use it at home and you have the ability to plug it into a wall, an AC charger might not be a bad idea because then you don't need to also have a power supply. But if you're going to be using it at the field and you know you're going to be connecting to, say, a power station at the field, or if your field doesn't have AC, you need to make sure you get a DC capable charger so you can plug a DC power source in. I like the M6 DAC because it lets you do both. You can use it at home on the bench, or you can use it at the field on a power supply. Now that you understand the different power supply options, we need to talk a little bit about power limitations. This charger says AC 200 watt and DC 700 watt. And what that means is when we're using the AC power supply as an input, that means we can only charge up to 200 watts of output. When we're using the DC supply, we can go up to 700 watts of output. So you need to make an informed decision there. What I will tell you, if you're a beginner and you don't understand what all this watt business means, you need to make sure you can supply at least 200 watts. In this day and age, I wouldn't buy a charger if it didn't supply at least 200 watts. So as we look at the different chargers that I have on my desk, you can see this one is an M6D. This is the same thing as this one, except it doesn't include the AC input, and it provides 500 watts of power on DC up to 15 amps. Also notice this marking 1-6S. What that means is we can charge up to a 6-cell battery. So you see that little marking there that says 2-6S? So we can connect anywhere from a 2S to a 6S battery. The other thing I'll point out is that these chargers that you've seen so far are what we call dual channel. And what dual channel means is we can plug two different batteries. Here's why a 2-channel charger is kind of cool. For the example I've just set up, I've got a 3-cell battery connected to the left side of this charger, and you can see that's 11.8 volts, and I have it charging at 1.3 amps. And on the right-hand side, I've got a 6-cell battery, and you can see that's 22.98 volts, and I have that one charging at 2 amps. That's the cool thing about a dual channel charger. It lets you charge two different kinds of batteries using different parameters for each one. They also have 4-channel chargers out there if you're interested in charging even more at one time. The last one I'll show you is this little Toolkit M9, and the reason I'm showing you this one is because it's got a nice little flip screen. So if you want to flip that screen up and you set it on your desk, it makes it very easy if you're sitting at your desk to see what's going on the charger. So I use this charger quite a bit on the desk, and also note that it provides 600 watts of power at 20 amps, and it goes from 1 cell to 8 cells. So if I wanted to charge an 8S battery, I can do that. Another thing I like about Toolkit RC chargers is some of the other capabilities they have built into their firmware. That's a subject for another day. Suffice it to say that there's some really cool software features in these chargers that let you use them for doing things other than charging batteries, and it can be very helpful from time to time. All right, let's recap the key takeaways for the charger discussion. Make sure you understand your power requirements, so either AC or DC or both, and then also make sure your charger, no matter AC or DC, minimally, you want it to supply 200 watts. I would never even consider in this day and age buying a charger that doesn't supply at least 200 watts AC and DC or better on DC. So 200 watts, that's minimum. And then the last thing you want to give some consideration to is whether or not you need a dual channel charger. If you only need to charge one battery at a time, you can get away with a single channel. I've been using single channels for a very long time, but if you want to charge more than one battery at a time, if you think that's important to you, make sure you go ahead and get a dual channel or a quad channel charger. The last thing we'll talk about in this video are cell checkers. I can't stress the importance of having one of these enough. You have to have a cell checker. Do not go out flying or utilizing your LiPo batteries without a cell checker. And the reason for that is before every single flight, I use my cell checker, I plug my balance lead in, and I take a look at what the battery is telling me. So I'll be looking for 4.2 volts on every cell. I do that before every single flight, and that way I know, I've double checked, and I know this battery's got the power I need to conduct my flight. Now I'm showing the Toolkit MC8 cell checker, and again, this one has some little software features in here that you don't find on the others. So I do like this one quite a bit, and this is the one I keep in my field box. I also have the ISDT Battery Go cell checker, and it functions the same way. You can plug it in on the side, and it's got a nice color screen, and it has another option that I really like, and that's automatic cell balancing. So I can hit cell balance start, and I can just set this down, and it'll go to work rebalancing those cells and making cell number 1 match up with cell number 2 and cell number 3. So I do like that feature quite a bit on the ISDT BatGo. And then finally, I have a generic cell checker. And this is the one that I first started with because I thought, you know, what's the point in spending, you know, 20 bucks or 25 bucks on one of these things when I can get this one for 10? And you can get it. The only thing I don't like about these is that they're not able to be calibrated in most cases. And that's what I like about these cell checkers, is that we can calibrate them. I'm not going to get into the calibration process, just suffice it to say that both ISDT BatGo and the MC8 by Toolkit can both be calibrated with the multimeter, which means you'll get the most accurate output results when you're checking your cell voltages. The key takeaways on the cell checker: you have a generic option, which is fine. They work fine, but be aware you can't calibrate it. So if it's not calibrated correctly from the factory, you have no remedy to fix that. That's why I prefer these color options, because the software on them does allow us to go in and calibrate. We can use our multimeter and validate that these voltages are correct, and if they're not, we can make an adjustment. So I like that feature. And I also really like the balance feature on this ISDT Go. You hit cell balance and start, and it'll start balancing. By the way, the Toolkit RC MC8 also has a cell balance feature. When you plug your battery in, if you press the jog dial, that little icon right there lights up, and that means it's auto balancing your cells. So both the Toolkit RC and the ISDT both provide that cell balance function. Some of these generic ones do as well, but you really have to check the description. This one does not, but these two both provide cell balancing, and I like that quite a bit. I hope you liked the content, and if you did, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. YouTube should recommend another video for you right about now. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy, and get out there and fly something.